Although animals cannot articulate their needs through words, they attempt to communicate with us through other means. However, comprehending their nonverbal communication is often challenging, and it falls on us to interpret their needs. Can you discern when an animal requires assistance? And in the case of the woman in our story, could she perceive that a couple of distressed lynxes were imploring for her aid? Let's discover the answer. Despite living in a small village throughout her life, Jane held ambitious aspirations. From a tender age, she aspired to become a doctor, driven by the desire to lend an empathetic ear and heal people, just like the doctors who attempted to cure her mother during her childhood, though they were unsuccessful. Therefore, Jane made a resolute decision to equip herself with the skills to care for her dear ones, should the need ever arise. She diligently pursued her studies in the small village school, and as she grew older, her father aided her in gaining admission to a highly regarded boarding school. It was expensive, but he wanted to help her live her dreams, and a small village school wasn't going to help her get into medical school. She would have to do all of the hard work, but she would feel his support as far as he could give it, and work hard she did. Jane knew that she would have to study a lot, and she had no time for distractions, but all that hard work paid off. She got excellent grades and received a scholarship to medical school. Her dreams were coming true. It took even more dedication than ever before to reach that final step. But finally, she could call herself a doctor, and yet her journey still wasn't over. She still had her residency to do, but also she felt tired and even a little burned out. There was no way that Jane was going to let all of that hard work go to waste. She missed her family and wished she could see them more. But each time when she was exhausted and thinking about giving up, she would just remember her mother, how sick she had been, and how helpless Jane had felt, not being able to help her. Jane never wanted to have that feeling again, so she pushed through all of her studies and all of the long hours working at the hospital and made her family proud. Her main focus was always to honor her mother, but with all of the hard work, she also learned to be proud of her own hard work. Finally, after all of those years, she was done. She had her degree, and no one would ever take it from her, but it was time to take a break and to go home. Jane surely deserved it, and she just wanted to spend some time with her father and other close family members. It was time to go back to her roots, and the little village she had called home for so many years. She packed everything and drove home. Her family was waiting to welcome her with open arms. They were so glad to have her back, even if it was only going to be for a little while. Jane was determined to take all of the rest and relaxation that she could manage. She went to bed in her childhood room, planning on sleeping as late as she could, but it was still early when she heard a knock on her door. It was her father. He explained that she had a few visitors, but the way he laughed made Jane nervous. Jane quickly got out of bed and got dressed. Who could it be? Opening the front door, it seemed like it was the entire village that came out to greet Jane. There was a row of people forming. It was touching, but speaking to them, it became clear that they had a few ulterior motives. They were all truly glad to see Jane, but they also wanted some medical assistance from someone that they trusted. Like most small villages, they were also wary of a new person coming in. They would only go to the doctor in the next county when they had no other choice and were deathly ill. Now they had one of their own people back home where they could help them out. Seeing her lazy day disappear before her eyes, Jane gave a little sigh and then went to her vehicle to grab her doctor's kit. She didn't have any medicine with her, but she could at least examine everyone and prescribe something or send them to a bigger town for more treatment when they needed it. After days of exams, Jane realized just how desperately the county needed a doctor. Patients came from all around, even those living in rural areas and on farms came to see her. Those that didn't know her personally had heard that she could be trusted. At first, she tried to explain that she wasn't back, but only home for a holiday. But after dozens of patients kept saying how happy they were to have her back, she gave up and just smiled. It seemed like she had come home for good, straight into a practice that she had never planned on. But as her father said, if she wanted to make her mother proud, what would be better than giving back to the community that had loved them all? She thought, why not give it a go after all? If it doesn't work out, I can always go back to the city, Afterward spread that she was staying, her family made sure that Jane got some time off before she started working. For a few days, she would just handle emergencies, but soon she was bored. It was time to jump back in. She set up a practice in town and even went on home visits for people who couldn't get to her. It was on her way to a farm that she saw a few baby lynxes on the road. She slowed down for their safety and to check them out. It was almost like they were running toward the car. It felt like they were trying to get her attention. But Jane knew better than to mess with wild animals. Their mother had to be out there somewhere, and even if they were really cute, there was just no way that she was going to get out. She knew these kittens' mother could do some major damage, so as soon as she could safely pass them, she sped up and went on her way to her patients. But for some reason, the lynx's eyes stayed with her. Why did it feel like they were sad? Like they were begging her to do something. Shaking off the feeling, she convinced herself she was being silly. She tried to concentrate on the patient she was driving to. All her patients deserved her undivided attention and care. What Jane didn't know was that the lynxes really were in a desperate situation. Their mother had been caught on some barbed wire. It was cutting into her stomach, and she was getting weaker by the minute. The babies were desperate to help their mother, but they didn't know how to help her. They might even have felt the same sort of sadness and helplessness that Jane herself had felt when her own mother had gotten sick, but she didn't know any of this was happening. She finished her medical assessment of her patient and treated him, and off she was on her way back to town. The kittens heard the car and they acted out of despair. Running back to the road, they went and sat in the middle of the road. Jane was surprised to see that they were still there and they were still all alone, but this time she couldn't get past them so easily. Each time that she tried to drive past them, they moved in front of her car. Once again, the look in their eyes bothered Jane. They looked almost tearful. Shaking her head, she told herself that she was seeing things. These animals couldn't be showing that much emotion. She had to have been projecting all of her own feelings onto them. She lay on the car horn, but they wouldn't budge. The lynxes were imploring her to take action, but she couldn't decipher their message. After attempting once more, they eventually responded and moved away. She continued on her journey, but upon glancing in her rear-view mirror, she saw the kittens looking utterly disheartened. Could animals display a sense of defeat? She abruptly halted her vehicle, unable to continue without helping them. Jane muttered to herself, anticipating that she might be devoured before disembarking from the vehicle. The lynxes hopped a little and then dashed into the bushes upon seeing her. Jane pursued them, only to discover that their mother was ensnared in a wire. Drawing from her rural upbringing, she possessed the know-how to release the lynxes from the entanglement. The mother lynx displayed remarkable patience as Jane tended to her wound and liberated her from the wire trap. Following this, she growled at her kittens, and the entire family scurried away. Jane felt immense contentment in trusting her instincts and rescuing the baby lynxes along with her mother. Though she couldn't help her own mother, this act of kindness served as a balm to her heart, soothing it ever so slightly.